Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment video. This week I am covering the very strange case of William Frost and the alleged manslaughter of Jane Frost, which took place in the Hexham area in 1857. I think that this will probably be quite a short story, but I hope you will still find it interesting. Sadly, the past lives of those involved in this week's case was almost impossible to find, so their backstory will be quite basic, and as they are related, I will add their information together. William Frost was said to be around 29 years old in 1857, so would have been born in around 1828. William was also known occasionally by the name of James Frost. He lived in Hexham and worked as a shoemaker. It was known that he was someone who was fond of drinking and also appeared to be fond of getting into fights. He seems to be still living at home with his mother Jane Frost, also the victim, and she often had to get involved with his problems to try and stop him when he was fighting. Jane was around 77 years old at the time of her death, so would have been born in around 1780. Her place of birth and parents are unknown. Jane does not appear to have a job, and it is most likely, because of her age, that she would have had other family living with her, and they would have no doubt supported her from their wages. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do find this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is very much appreciated, and it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify. So I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. On the 6th of July 1857, a large crowd had gathered near the cattle market in Hexham. A band was playing known as the Band of Hope, and people were generally enjoying themselves, and of course a few drinks were had by many of the crowd. At some point during the morning, a fight broke out between William Frost and another man by the name of John Dodds. It's not clear what started the fight, but the two men seemed determined to keep it going, as some other people had separated them twice, but they had found a way back to each other and the fight continued. Someone else in the crowd went to find William's mother Jane, and she headed up to the area to try and stop him from fighting and to bring him home. When Jane arrived, the two men were again fighting, and as she tried to separate them, she was thrown to the ground. She cried out in pain, saying that her leg was broken. Some women came to her aid, and as she was unable to walk, they carried her back to her home, and a doctor was sent for. William and John were no longer fighting by now. However, William does not seem to have been too concerned about his mother. When Dr. Stainthorpe arrived, he believed she had a fracture to her thigh. He felt that Jane was too frail to survive the injury, and although he took care of her as best he could, Jane died on August the 1st, 1857. William was then arrested for causing the death of his mother. The inquest was held at Hexham before Coroner Reid a few days later. No details were given as to who had identified the body of Jane Frost. However, it is possible it may have been another family member or one of the neighbours who knew her well. Mary Rutherford of Hexham said she had been present on July the 6th. She said there had been a very large crowd in the area that day, all listening to the band play. She said many of the crowd were drinking, and she believed that most of them were quite drunk. She said she saw William and John in the crowd. She did not know why, but the two men had begun to fight with each other. She said she saw them both strike several blows before some other people in the crowd parted them. She said after the second fight, the two men were in different parts of the crowd, and she looked down the hill and she saw William's mother Jane heading towards them. Mary said at the same time, William was forcing his way through the crowd to get back to John Dodds. Jane was there when the two men met, and she said she saw her fall to the ground. She said she was not 100% sure if she had been pushed by William or others in the crowd, but she did feel that it had been William who had pushed her. She said she went over to see if Jane was hurt. Jane, Mary said, told her that she could not stand. She said she thought her thigh was broken. Mary said she tried to get her to her feet, but she fell again, so she stayed with her until another lady arrived and she was carried back to her home. Mary said Jane had been confined to bed ever since and had not been able to walk. She said she had seen her a few days after the fall, and Jane had told her the doctor had examined her and said that she would never recover from the injury. It would kill her. She said she did not believe that Jane had any broken bones, but she was not actually sure. When asked, she said on the day of July the 6th, both William and John Dodds had been very drunk. She said she had spoken to William about it a couple of days later, and he had told her that he had been so drunk he had not even known that he had been fighting. Mary Swinburne of Hexham said she had been at home on the 6th of July. She had not gone to see the band, but she had heard that some fighting had taken place, so she went out to see what had happened. She said she saw the two men, William and John, fighting, and she saw Jane Frost come up to separate them. She was told that someone had gone to Jane's house to tell her that her son was fighting. Mary Swinburne said she saw Jane try to take hold of William by the waist and pull him away. She said as she did this, William pushed her roughly away with his hand and she fell onto the ground. She fell on to the stone path. She said she heard her cry out that her leg was broken. Mary Rutherford stayed with her until a woman by the name of Bessie Campbell came up and helped to carry her home. She said she didn't go over, but she did hear that Jane had been confined to bed until her death. When asked, she said she went home shortly after Jane was taken home. The fight had been broken up again by other people in the crowd, and she did not believe that the two men fought again after this. She did not know if William had followed his mother home, and she did not mention if she thought William was drunk at the time of the fight. Bessie Campbell, although she was mentioned, does not appear to have given any evidence at the inquest. Dr. Stainthorpe said that on the afternoon of July the 6th he had been called to the home of Jane Frost. He said he had found her in bed unable to stand, and on examining her he believed that she had a fracture to her thigh. He said she was very thin and did not appear to be in good health. He did not feel she would survive the injury. He said he had taken care of her almost until she died. Although he did not state that a post-mortem had taken place, he said he believed that the injury had been the cause of her death, adding that a very slight fall could have caused such an injury in a woman so frail as Jane Frost, and a slight push would have easily caused her to fall. The police stated that they had no other witnesses to call. They explained that they had been unable to find anyone willing to give evidence, although it was clear that many people had been present at the time. They said they had struggled to even get the two women, Mary Swinburne and Mary Rutherford, to agree to appear at the inquest. However, they did not suggest that people were afraid of William, more simply that giving evidence was something that no one in the crowd that day had wanted to do. So no further evidence was given, and the coroner then spoke to the jury. He stated that they must consider if there had been a breach of the peace on the day of July the 6th, and if this had led to William or someone else causing his mother Jane to fall, and if her injuries had led to her death. He said if they were satisfied with these facts and that they had been caused because of her son, then William would be guilty of manslaughter. The jury, who retired for a short time, returned a verdict of guilty of manslaughter against William Frost, and he was committed for trial. William was at first taken to Morpeth Prison. However, after a short time he was allowed bail, although the details of this were not easy to find, but he did not have to remain in prison until the trial date, which was not until December. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Jane Frost. As I often say, this again may sadly have been a case of a pauper's funeral. It's not entirely clear what family Jane had, or if any of them would have been able to afford the cost of a funeral. And paupers' funerals were sometimes paid for from funds at the workhouse, or on other occasions they would come from funds available at the churches in the area. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Jane anywhere in the area of Hexham. The trial was set to take place at the end of December 1857. However, in this case, there would be no trial. As I have sometimes mentioned in other cases, prior to the trial, a hearing would be held before the grand jury. At this hearing, the judge and or the magistrates would decide if there was a case to answer, and such a hearing was held at Hexham in connection with the charge against William Frost. And the judge's statement was pretty much as follows. The case against William Frost was one where it must be considered if the death of Jane Frost had been nothing more than an accident. It was clear that two men had been fighting and that the mother of one, an elderly frail woman, had wanted to remove her son from the fight. In doing so, she ended up in the middle of the crowd of people, and it appears that she tried to take hold of her son and fell. One witness seemed to claim she had been pushed by William, and the other was not so sure. He said he felt that it did not seem similar to a case where two men had been fighting and one had killed the other. It seemed more like an accident, and he could not see how this could be made into a crime. If, however, it was believed that William had pushed his mother on purpose and with malice, then it would be manslaughter. After a brief consultation, the grand jury ignored the charges against William Frost. However, he was still to stand trial based on the verdict at the inquest, and almost immediately the prosecution stated that they had no evidence to offer against William, and William Frost was then discharged and free to return home. The judge made one final statement telling those in court that he felt it was not always correct for a man to be sent to trial based on the coroner's inquest, especially when they did not seem to have all of the evidence. They must, in future, be much more careful. I did not find any details of William after this, but I do hope that he learned from his mistakes and did not find himself in trouble with the police anymore after this. This was another very strange case. It's clear that the two men were fighting and that both were very drunk at the time and did not fully know what they were doing. And it is also clear that Jane was injured due to the fight taking place. But was she pushed, or did she simply fall due to the crush of the crowds around her? And did Jane really die because of her broken bone, or is it possible that she would have died anyway? The doctor did state that she was quite frail and malnourished. I am aware that people can die because of broken bones, especially the elderly, but more often than not, it is because of another health condition such as an infection. Was William responsible for his mother's death, and should he have been charged with manslaughter? Well, in a way, he was responsible, even if she did simply fall, as she would not have been there had it not been for his fighting, but I'm not sure that he should have been charged with manslaughter. Were the magistrates correct to throw the case out? Well, yes, I think they were, as, just as I have said before, I do feel this was more of an accident than something William had done on purpose. And even though he was discharged, I am sure that he probably spent the rest of his life regretting what had happened that afternoon. But what do you think? Do you think William did push his mother on purpose and this caused her to fall and break her thigh? Or do you think he was so drunk at the time that he did not know what he was doing, and sadly Jane simply got caught up in the fight and this caused her to fall? Do you think the magistrates were correct to throw out the case, or do you think he should still have been tried for manslaughter? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very odd little story interesting. It is actually not the story that I planned to write this week, but unfortunately I had a burst pipe and a flood in my kitchen and I had to get things sorted out. So this left me with very little time to research the other story that I planned to write, so I opted for this one. Anyway, I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do look forward to seeing you all again next week.